Hey guys, welcome to this week's video where I'm going through my complete AMCAS application that I used to apply to the 2021 application cycle. If you're new here, my name is Maggie. I'm 26 years old. This is my second time applying to medical school. I first applied the summer before my senior year. I did really know the process very well. I did take the MCAT. I did well and I was happy with that. But as far as applying, I applied pretty late in the cycle, only to 4 schools. And then it took me a while to get in those secondaries, so that pushed me back even later. Anyway, I got one interview, got on the wait list, and never got pulled off the wait list. So 3 years later, I really got my act together. I found Dr. Gray's amazing free advice that helped me a lot, started working as an EMT, did all those things, applied super early the second time around, had to retake my MCAT because the first score expired, but the results of the second time applying, I got 15 interview invites between MD and DO schools, and then got 10 acceptances. So I'm basically just sharing with you all the things that I did, all the things that I learned along the way, so you guys can have the same success. It is a hard process, but with a little bit of planning and a little bit of good information and help from others, I think it's definitely doable. You just have to stay motivated and keep at it. Anyway, if you're a pre-med and you want to subscribe to this channel, that'd be cool. Like this video, yada yada. Anyway, all that good stuff. And let's switch over the screen and we'll get to it. Also, if you're curious how I'm doing this split screen video thing, I'll link the video tutorial below because I feel like it's kind of cool. Anyway, so most of the first and second page are blanked out just because it's a lot of personal information and yeah, you guys don't really need to see that, but one thing to note is the submission date. So I submitted this June 3rd, 2020, and I can't remember if I had my MCAT score in or not. I probably didn't, but I feel like a lot of my success came from applying early. The first time that I applied, my submission date was probably in July, and then on top of that, it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get verified. So you can apply without your letters of recommendation uploaded and without your MCAT score. I highly suggest applying and do a little bit each week leading up to that submission time frame that you're able to submit it, because it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get verified. Being early is super, super helpful. All right, and you can see the process date. Mine took a little under 3 weeks, but if you apply later, I think it can take up to 4 to 6 weeks. So the second page, again, that's a lot of personal information that's blanked out. And you can note that in addition to a bunch of C's that you're going to see later on, I had an institutional action, got in trouble for drinking in college, and I just wrote about my reflections and how I was a bad decision, but it allowed me to become a more mature, sensible, and responsible student for the rest of my time at Mississippi College. And that was that. I honestly was really worried that this was going to prevent me from getting in, but I still had success, so it's okay. So then you'll see that some of my grades, and if you notice, the status is HS. These were high school grades. I did a dual enrollment when I was like junior or senior in high school, and this really screwed me over for applying to medical school because, as you can see, I didn't get great grades in those classes. AP Calculus, dual enrollment, I got a C, and college algebra, I don't know why I got a B in algebra, but I did, and that was in high school. And because it's like any college you go to, even if it was while you're in high school, it goes on your AMCAS application, so that sucks. Okay, and then one more from high school, psychology, another B. And then we get into when I went to Mississippi College for undergrad. I went there for 4 years, and you'll see more C's. I was undecided at this point, had no idea what I wanted to do. I was not pre-med until halfway through sophomore year, and I rode on the equestrian team. Like, horses were my whole world at one point, and yeah, that's like all I wanted to do was ride on the equestrian team. I also got a job as a waitress when I was a freshman, so for a year I was working literally 6 or 7 nights a week. So on top of 3 lessons per week for the equestrian team, plus traveling out of town 4 weekends per semester, my grades really suffered. You can see here, calculus, got a C in that. English composition, oh, I am not a fan of English or government or any classes like those. Yeah, history, C. Cal 2, I did a little better, got a B. Gen Chem, oh, that I remember literally like the only time I had to study usually was like on bus rides to horse shows. No time to study. Gen Chem 2, I did a little better, and you can see this is sophomore year. So it was really halfway between sophomore year where I decided my major. I declared it chemistry with the pre-med track and told my manager I could not work more than 3 shifts per week. That was a huge game changer. Wish I had done it earlier, but oh well. And then as you can see, the rest of sophomore and junior year, I didn't get any more C's. I was doing a lot better. And then by junior year, I just completely quit working as a waitress, and that obviously helped my grades a lot. I got an A in Organic Chem 1, but a B in the lab, and then the next semester it was switched. So I got like a B in Organic Chem 2, but an A in the lab. So wasn't getting a 4.0 still by any means, but I was doing a lot better. If you guys are in a similar situation, the money is not worth it. It's a short-term fix, but in the long term, if you're wanting to go to medical school, like just quit your job or cut back. Like tell your manager you can't work that much. Okay, so I did pretty well here, and then you can see did well in my other classes senior year, except for medical physiology, which was a 5-hour class. I got a C in that, and honestly, that was partly senioritis. By then, my friend and I had decided that we were going to move to San Diego, and we had been there for spring break, and we're like, let's just move here after graduation. We didn't even go to graduation. Yeah, so senioritis. Also, this is at the point where I was on the wait list for school, so I was like, but what if I get pulled off? So that C won't matter. Dumb. Just dumb. I should have really applied myself a little bit more, but happens. Okay, so after my senior year, so you'll see that I went to a post-bac program, and this is because, so obviously I moved to San Diego thinking maybe I'll get pulled off the wait list and go to medical school, or maybe I won't. I worked as a lab technician in the meantime, and then when I knew I wasn't going to get in, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to reapply at some point, but I don't want to apply with the same application. I need to improve something, and one of the things that is kind of a weakness for my application is my grade point average. And you'll see even after the post-bac, I had a 3.31 science GPA and a 3.35 cumulative GPA. That's quite hard to say. So what I decided to do was do a post-bac program to increase my GPA, and it actually did increase. I don't have the exact GPA from my first application, but I think the first one was like probably 3.14 and like I don't know, something a little lower than that. So it increased it by a little bit. And then at least like the last thing on my application wasn't this C and Med Phys. So I got some mainly A's and a few B's in that post-bac program. But I only did 2 quarters because financially I couldn't continue. My loans kept like not coming through. I was getting dropped from the classes I wanted to take. So I wasn't even like taking the amount of classes I wanted to. It was just a whole mess. So I only did 2 quarters, and then I felt like that was going to look bad on my application that I didn't finish the program. So I was kind of lost at what to do at that point. And then as you'll see in my extracurricular section later, I ended up working as an EMT, and that was the best decision ever because it was amazing clinical experience. And then I decided to retake the MCAT because 3 years later it had expired, like I mentioned. And that kind of put me on the right track to reapply. But for a while there, I had no idea what to do after this post-bac program because I felt like it looked bad that I didn't finish, but ended up not being as bad as I realized. So you can see the high school 2.5. That is from those dual enrollment classes that I did. And really wish I hadn't done that in high school. Anyway. Okay, so you'll see 509. This is from the first time that I applied. I was so happy with that 509. So proud of myself. My number one motivation studying that summer was do well the first time so you never have to take it again, which is so funny because then it expired and I had to take it again. And I think going through the mindset of convincing myself to retake the MCAT 3 years later was pretty hard. I looked into PA school and all those things. But the number one motivator was I told myself, when I'm 50 years old, I'm gonna look back, and if I decided not to reapply to medical school because I didn't want to take the MCAT again, I will be so disappointed in myself. I have to at least try. Like, that's just a silly reason not to reapply to medical school. So I like ditched the GRE book that I had for 2 weeks, and I was like, all right, my mindset is right. I'm retaking the MCAT. I did a lot better the second time, and the top 3 reasons: I took more full-length exams, I timed myself throughout most of my studying because I knew the first time I hadn't finished, and so timing, more full-length exams, and I gave myself a lot of time to study because I was working full-time as an EMT. So was incredibly happy with that score. Even though I didn't want to retake it, I was like, oh, okay, well, since I did better, like, this actually really helps me since I do have a lower GPA. So next we get into the extracurriculars, and if you want to hear me talk about how I wrote these descriptions as a story, you can go to my other video. Maybe I'll put it up in the thing that like comes across, you know. And I talk about how I went about writing these as stories, and I compare the descriptions to my prior application to the ones here. Anyway, if you're interested in that, you can watch that video. But it's, in order to not be like repetitive, I'll just talk about like why I did these experiences, and yeah. So community service volunteer, you'll note that this is only 10 hours. I would not have put this on my application unless, and the only reason that I did was because it was only 10 hours because of COVID. It got cut early because this was like right in the midst of COVID beginning, but I didn't want it to look like I hadn't like done any volunteer work in 3 hours, and it did get cut out early because of COVID. So I just went ahead and put it on there. And then EMT, this was a most meaningful description just because it was incredibly meaningful to me. I had amazing experiences, but ultimately, like, there was so much I wish that I could do when we had a critical patient, and like just handing them off to other people to go be fixed. It's like, oh, I want to be the doctor. Like, I want to be the one fixing them. So that was an eye-opening experience. I highly recommend working as an EMT. If it's full-time, I wouldn't recommend trying to do full-time on top of school, but if you have a gap year, it's an awesome, awesome experience. And then I worked as a caregiver for a quadriplegic mom. And this actually came up in my interviews because I also worked as a helper for a disabled radiologist. And the woman wanted to know, like, do you have a special interest in this? And not really, like, I enjoyed these experiences a lot and all that, but I didn't purposely seek out these experiences, or I don't have any specific interests. It just happened, and they were amazing experiences, and I talk about that here. And then working as a nanny, I worked a lot as a nanny in that awkward like 2-year period between applying to medical school the first and second time, because I just didn't know what to do with my life, and I hated my lab tech job. So I worked as a nanny for a while. And moving on, lab tech, like I said. I got this job right out of college, and it was kind of cool because the research side of things was really cool. They took fat tissue from animals, isolated the stem cells, and then re-injected them for osteoarthritis, to treat osteoarthritis, and that was really fascinating, but my day-to-day tasks were not fascinating, and I only lasted in that job for 6 months. I'm not a fan of continuing to do something if you don't like it, as you might be able to see. So research, I did this in undergrad, and it was a great experience. I think a lot of undergrad institutions, besides the whole COVID thing, under normal circumstances, if they have research, like, approach your professors, ask them about it, get involved. It's definitely a great thing to have on applications, and maybe you'll love it, maybe you won't like it, but it's nice to know and just like see that aspect of all that research stuff. Anyway, so I did research for 1.5 years or 2 years. I was also in my SMAC's chemistry club. Me and my friend did that, and it was super fun. And I did some volunteering at hospitals. That's another way, a great way to find volunteering is like everyone has a hospital near them, unless you're in like a really small town. But if you're near a city, there's a hospital by you. So all you have to do is go to their website and search somewhere. There is a tab or a page about volunteering, and you can just like go to the information sessions they have or just like sign up straight on the website. That's what I did for 2 different instances. When I was like back home in Ohio, I drove an hour to go to the big Columbus or to go to the hospital in the big city, Columbus. And then when I was in college in Mississippi, went to Jackson at that hospital. So just go on any hospital's website near you and find what volunteer opportunities they have, because that's where I found most of mine. And then you'll see here that I just clumped together my shadowing, because at this point I had 3 different experiences, and I didn't even have room to do 3 different. I think I have a total of 14 here. Yeah, I don't know. I think I have 14 experiences, so I couldn't even make these separate if I wanted to. And you'll see that I did shadowing abroad in Spain. That was a wonderful experience. It's definitely like not something you have to do, and it's also expensive, but if you have the money and you're interested, it's pretty cool. Although I think I would have definitely got more out of it if I were able to speak Spanish. But luckily a lot of the doctors I followed each day, they did speak English. It was just a lot of the patient interactions that I wasn't able to understand in the moment. It kind of had to be explained to me after the fact, but it was a really cool experience. And then a tip for finding shadowing around you: cold call, cold email, literally 100 different practices, and you'll find shadowing. Besides all this COVID stuff, or even with all this COVID stuff, there's a girl that I tutor for the MCAT, and that's what she did. She called 30 plus different practices and finally found one person respond to her, and she was able to shadow for 2 weeks. So, like, if you're saying, oh, I can't find shadowing, and you haven't called 100 practices around you, then get to calling. A lot of people will say no, a lot of people won't even answer, but all you need is that one doctor who has a private practice who's like, yeah, I'd love to have you. So that's what I did to find the shadowing with the DO, because it had been like 5 years since I shadowed when I applied the second time. So I was like, oh crap, like I need to find shadowing. Luckily I fit it in right before COVID, so whew. And that's why it's only 16 hours. I plan to do more, but COVID. Okay, another volunteer experience. Again, I drove to Columbus, an hour away from my home, through the whole summer, and it was awesome. Just went on their website, found out the info of how to get involved with volunteering, and it was really cool. And then, like I said, so my server experience is most meaningful because it really was the catalyst to choosing my major. So to me, like, you might be like, oh, my server job means nothing to me, but it had a huge role in deciding my major and becoming pre-med. So that's why it was most meaningful. And of course, equestrian team, because horses were my world. I loved it so much. Even like junior and senior year when I was doing better in grades, like I cut out the working, but no, I did equestrian team for 4 years. Loved it, miss it, wish I could still do it, but it's a little expensive when you're not in college anymore. And then my college has like clubs and tribes instead of sororities and fraternities. So if you're wondering what the heck Laguna Social Tribe is, it's basically a sorority. And then here's my personal statement. I haven't made a video just going over my personal statement yet, but maybe I'll make a separate video. Anyway, you can see here that I started with kind of like a story that was like kind of interesting, the helicopter flying in, and how that is related to me really wanting to be a doctor, because we just hand them off to the team of nurses and doctors, this critical patient who's like bagged and can't breathe and like blood seeping through his nose, and it's like, oh, I want to be a doctor. I don't want to be handing him off. I want to know how to fix them. And then I just go through more stories and talk about how growing up, like I really rarely saw people who looked like me being a physician. I had no doctors in the family. I never went to doctors as a kid. So yeah, but anyway, you can read that. Okay. As far as where I applied, where I interviewed, and where I got in. Oh, wait. First, let's talk about letters of recommendation. So obviously I X'd out their names, but I got one from my OChem professor. So I had him for OChem 1 and OChem 2, and he was my advisor. So he was a great person to get a letter from, even 3 years down the road where I was really worried where he wouldn't remember who I was. But when I emailed him, he responded, oh my gosh, Maggie, I'd be so happy to write you a letter. Like they were, him and my other professor both were like, yes, of course. and they wrote me letters for the first time too. So I was happy that they remembered me. And if you're a non-traditional student, and you're worried about this, don't be, because if like you did have a good relationship with them, even if it was 3 years ago, they apparently still remember you. So OChem professor / advisor, and then employer. So the job where I was the caregiver for the quadriplegic mom, she wrote me a letter of recommendation. And quick tip, ask early. She had some computer troubles, and it got to the point where it was mid to end July, and I didn't have her letter because she was having these computer issues. And I was like, I emailed her and I was like, if you're not able to write my letter, like I totally understand. Because she hadn't responded to my text prior to that to follow up. And I was like, I totally understand, like just let me know, because my secondary applications are complete and just waiting for your letter. So some of my secondaries got a little bit delayed because I was waiting on that last letter. So ask early, follow up when need be, and then ask them like, if you're too busy, I understand, like just let me know so I can ask somebody else. Like I need to know if you're too busy and you can't write it, or like what's going on. Like my secondaries are waiting on this letter. And then my third letter was my biology professor. I had her for like genetics and genetics and something else. And then I also did research with her. So another like great person to ask for a letter. These were the only 3 I got. I got one more from the physician that I shadowed for DO, but I didn't end up sending it to any schools. Like this right here isn't blanked out. I just didn't send it. Actually, I don't think he ended up uploading it either. And then I would say at least like either look at the schools you're applying to see how many letters you need, or just get more letters, because there's one school on this list I wasn't able to complete the secondary application because I was missing a non-science professor letter. And I was like, I'm not about to just go ask some random non-science, but I didn't have anybody that I had a good relationship with, and I just didn't want to go through that. It was only one school, but to avoid not being able to complete an application, and if you have more people to ask, go ahead and get more letters. Like, unlike me, get a non-science professor letter just in case you need it for one of the applications. Okay, now we can talk about where I applied, where I interviewed, yada yada. I don't know why I'm saying yada yada, blah blah blah. Anyway, okay, so the ones that are highlighted are schools that I interviewed at. The ones that are crossed off are ones that I didn't finish the secondary application. You can see the Uniformed Services, University of Health Science, blah blah blah. That is the one where they needed the non-science professor letter, so I didn't finish that application. OHSU, I'm really disappointed in myself. I was so burnt out because I did this, plus DO, plus Texas, because my dad lives in Texas. I thought I'd be a Texas resident. Ended up not being it, but I was still like filling out that application. And by the time OHSU, they had sent it kind of late. I was so burnt out and I didn't do it. And I'm really disappointed in myself, even though they're a public out-of-state school and I probably had very little chance. You never know. And I feel bad because my boyfriend's from Oregon and I should have done that secondary. So yeah. What else? This pink dot is because most of these I applied to really early, but this is one that I added late, and then I ended up never hearing from them. So whether that's because it's late or because I never would have if I had applied early, we will never know. And then this pink X, I got an interview invite but didn't attend the interview because I already had 10 acceptances at that point. So, and my boyfriend doesn't want to move to Wisconsin, and I'm like, okay, I don't care at that point. Okay. So, Case Western is actually the school that in 2017 I got my one interview at, got waitlisted, and what do you know? This time around I got another interview and got waitlisted. So, I was quite bummed just because I feel like I've grown so much as a person that it's like, how can I have the exact same result? That was a little hurtful. But it's okay. Obviously, I have plenty of other options. Kaiser, I interviewed at, never heard back from. Didn't go to that one. Neomed, okay. All the rest, WSU interviewed at, got rejected. And the rest got interviewed at and accepted. So I'm currently, deciding between Colorado, Cincinnati, and Wake Forest. Those are our top 3, but I have no idea where we'll end up going because waiting for financial aid awards. So far, Cincinnati is the cheapest because I get in-state tuition. Alright, so that wraps up this week's video. My final result of applying to 20 schools was 15 interview invites, and I got accepted to 6 MD schools and 4 DO schools. Still deciding on where to go, but I hope that this video gave you some ideas and tips on how to go about applying when you're ready to apply, or maybe some tips for the MCAT or writing your descriptions. And I look forward to next week's video. Subscribe, like this video, all that good stuff.